welcome to my shop. Now in this episode we're going to go ahead and build a lathe station. Back in September I bought a lathe from Grizzly. I love the lathe, but it doesn't really have a home in my shop. It needs kind of its own dedicated cart. Now what I currently do is I put it up on top of my table saw router station, which is heavy. It's a two-person lift. It's a heavy lathe. And it puts it a little too high for me, right? The lathe really needs to be lower. It was just up a little too high. So we're going to address that issue, as well as it'll give us a place to put all the assorted lathe crap that comes with your lathe. You know, the chucks and the mandrels and the tools and the bushings, and have a good dedicated place where we can keep those. So let's take a look at the plans I did. Okay, so we have my plans here in SketchUp for the lathe station. I'll make these available, but keep in mind that these don't follow best SketchUp practices or whatever. They're very rough. In fact, when I designed this is really my first attempt in SketchUp. So things aren't grouped correctly and probably aren't laid out right. I don't care. It was enough for me to envision my project and get it done. So I tend not to stress too much about working in computers, and to do it, you know, I tend to normally just sketch it out on paper because my day job is so technical that I really rather just go as simple as possible. But I thought it'd be a good way to show everybody what I'm planning to do here. It even shows kind of the wheel assembly, a basic version. I did some changes. The shelf isn't in the final version. As well as I do kind of have cutting diagrams, though I altered the drawer size. These were a little too shallow, and I had to use some more of this to do so. As well as they cut this wrong. This is at 38 inches, but I had them do the first and second cuts at the hardware store so I could fit it in the car, and they were less wieldy on my table saw. But they cut this one here at 30, so it threw everything off, and I had to use some scraps that I have. But basically, I'll make this available. You guys can use it however you'd like, but keep in mind that it's very rough. But it might help you with the way that you're going to go ahead and use this. You can use this cart any way. I'm using it as a lathe station. It would make a nice sharpening station, or you could probably even put a chop saw on it, or even a roll around workbench with some under storage here would be really good. If you're going to use it as a workbench, I would make the overhangs bigger so you can put some clamps on it. But it's a nice little cart, and I'm really kind of happy with it. So let's go ahead and start building this. Okay, the first thing we need to do is start milling up the legs. Now the legs are 4x4 Douglas fir. I bought them at the home center. I bought all the materials for this project at the local home center. I bought the good plywood. That would be the good plywood at the home center. And all the various screws and drawer slides I all got in basically one location. I will have some projects coming up with better plywood. So if anybody knows a good plywood supplier in the Pennsylvania area, please let me know. I'm hoping to do some stuff with maybe some cherry ply or something. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to start milling up these legs. The first thing I want to do is just lop them in half. I mean, this is just a rough cut. Doesn't have to be pretty. That blade needs a good sharpening. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and account for the snipe. We'll cut that off. And then I measure 27 inches, right? Which would be right about here, right? So once I cut off all the snipe, we'll set up at the table saw to cut these to the right length with a stop block. But 27 lengths, it's a real short leg. This is a pretty short table because I got to account for the height of the lathe. So the lathe height would be good here. We got to figure out that the table is only going to come about that high. So short legs, but everything should work out. So I'm going to go ahead and lop one end off all these, and then we'll set up a stop block to cut all these to the same length. Okay, so I'm over at the table saw. I had to take my splitter off because I'm not making a through cut here. My blade's not high enough to cut this in one pass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push it through on the sled, flip it over, and then lop it off. Make the second pass. So I cut the first one to length. Now I want to match every one to that exact length. Now if I'm off a little bit, a 1/16 or an inch, it's not going to matter as long as they're all the same length. So I'm going to take the cutoff I had and bring that up. And clamp this down. Now every one I make will be the same length. Okay, I'll take the cut end that we lopped off. All right, and that's I went to the home center and bought some plywood. And I had them do preliminary cuts. That keeps the size down, so it's a little more manageable for me on my small table saw. Plus, I could get it in the car. But when I had them do that, they did the cut wrong. They did it 30 inches instead of 38. So I had to go back and buy another 2x4 sheet of plywood. I wasn't too happy about that. But we can go ahead and start making our cuts. I'm basically going to show you how to do the first one. The other 1,000 cuts I have to do on the cut list, pretty much the same, so we'll catch up when I'm done with those. But let's start this one. The first one needs to be at 40 3/4 inches. Sometimes still too big for the saw. Bought this, makes safer cuts. Okay, I have all the 3/4 inch plywood cut, except for the wheel assembly parts. We'll get to those later. But now what I need to do is I need to lay out the markings for the dadoes. Basically, the main box construction is kind of held together with dadoes. We'll glue and screw the whole case together. I'm going for strength here, not beauty. I don't care if I see screws from the outside. It doesn't bother me on shop furniture. But we'll try to hide them and not make it so obvious or look really crappy. So the first thing I need to do is I have the large left side, or the left side, and the mid support. Now the left side is larger than the mid support because it's allowing for the groove for the bottom to go across. It hangs down a little. So therefore, there are two sizes because this doesn't go all the way down. It sits in a groove in the bottom. So I offset those 1 inch. 1 1/8 inch, and that'll allow for that offset. So when I go and lay some of those stretchers, we're all lined up. Let's go in a little closer and get to work. Okay, now in the SketchUp, I'll actually do center lines and stuff. It's better to go off center lines. Your ply might be different than mine. Even the extra piece I bought is different than the rest of the ply. It doesn't really matter where I'm putting it, but so I'll put center lines. You guys go off of center lines, or you can take the ply and do exactly what I'm doing here. This ply is actually pretty close to 3/4 of an inch, which is really surprising. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a mark down at the bottom, 3/4, 3/4. Right? So that's where the first dado would start. And that's going to be the dado for the bottom groove. Right? Right? Look at that. And I'll just go ahead and work my way up. After looking at this, I think this middle shelf is a little too, there's not much space on these two shelves. So I'm going to do away with the middle shelf. And then maybe down the road I'll put in something like another drawer pull-out tray or something. But we're going to forgo with this. One of the things, when you're looking at it in SketchUp, it looks really good, but I forgot that this is a real small cabinet. It's really not that big. So that doesn't really work. No biggie. We just won't put it in. Next we'll go over and we'll set up the table saw to do some dados. I installed my data stack and put on a sacrificial fence. I'm going to make the first cuts on both of these boards, and they're basically going to be, I'm removing this top section on the left board. That's all this one gets. And then I'm going to go ahead and remove the same section on the left or the right panel. Even though it doesn't get these dividing grooves, it does get the bottom groove as well as this top groove. So I'll do that at the same time. Took off the sacrificial fence, and I moved this back 3/4 of an inch. Now what I'll do is, here's the edge I cut. I'm going to spin it around, and we're going to cut the bottom groove that'll hold the bottom. Good fit. Good fit. I'll go ahead and cut the bottom groove on the other side. Okay, so now I moved the fence the right distance to do the mid support. Now we're not doing that shelf. So I think we're just going to go ahead and cut this. Now, when I do the mid support, the distance between the fence and the blade is different because that's a different length board. So we'll have to reset up to do that dado. But let's go ahead and take care of this one. This here is actually the top. The top and the bottom get a groove 14 inches in for the mid support. So I'm going to go ahead and cut both of these. Okay, with that last dado, that's the last cut, or the last dado needed to assemble the main carcass. So I think what we'll do is we'll head over to the bench and we'll start putting this together. Okay, I drilled some pilot holes for the screws, and now I'll put in a countersink. Excuse me. All right. I'll do that to all the joints, and then we'll go ahead and assemble it with some glue and screws. So I'll flip it over and take a chisel and knock any little blowout on the back so they sit nice, the cross pieces sit nice. Okay, so now that that's done, I got to go ahead and mark for attaching those legs, and they're going to get attached by screws too, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and make some marks 2 1/4 inches in, right? So I'll actually put this one up a little higher so it doesn't conflict with the drawer hardware. So I made 3 marks, and then I'm going to make 7/8 of an inch in. I'm going to make another mark for another screw. Right? So now I'll just drill those like I did shank hole bit. Right? Now this bit is the same size as the screw. I want the screw to dig into the other piece, not bind up on this one. So I'll just go ahead and drill these. And then I'll put the countersinks just like I did on the top. Okay, so now I can glue and screw these together, except for one thing. I messed up. What I did, or what I didn't do, is cut the back rabbets for the back of the thing. So, got to head back over to the table saw, reinstall my dado stack, and go ahead and cut those rabbets. So I set this for 1/2 inch deep this way, 3/8 down. I will create a rabbet 1/2 inch wide, 3/8 inch deep for the 1/2 inch panel in the back. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll just run another dado. Now we're ready to start assembling. This is the bottom piece here. This is the mid support. Go down like that. So what I am going to do is run some glue. Not much left in that. I'll switch to this white glue. Okay. whole thing on its side, like this. Actually, because of the back rabbet, fling this around. Apply these right angle clamps. Now, I bought these at Harbor Freight, and they are absolutely lovely. They're well worth the money. I gotta get some more of them, but go ahead, line that up. Tighten that down. Now I can go ahead and drill some pilot holes. Okay, I'll just come up and drill. Okay, good and good. I'll go ahead and do the rest. Good morning. Had a good night last night, got some sleep. Back out here, and hopefully we'll finish this up today. I'm going to go ahead and finish the sub-assembly we got to put in the shelf. That, no different than anything else. We'll just stick that shelf in. Okay, I messed up. Cut the rabbet on the wrong side of this piece. I'm not really sure how I did it, but I did it. So what I'm going to do is either have the back stop short and then put just a kicker back there to hold it. It's probably what I'll do. And then I'll get some poplar or some ply and fill in these gaps here. Decided I am going to go back and try to fix these. I don't want any stops I would put to interfere with the drawers and stuff. So I measured for the depth of the mortise, and just going to drag this knife, and I will even these two really nice legs here, right? It's a pretty good looking leg. We'll put that there. Equal grain towards the thing, right? Not too bad. But what I want to do now is I want to take this sharp edge off both sides here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an 1/8 inch round over on the inside and a larger round over on the outside.